for the warm welcome, and lovely to be here to update you all on what the Digital Twin Hub Governance and Trust Working Group has been doing. And as John kindly introduced me, I'm Anne-Marie Friel. I'm a partner at Pinsent Masons, and I'm going to chair this panel because we thought a panel would be the most interesting way to present the work of the working group so far to you all. And I'm really pleased. I've got a great set of panelists, and all of these panelists are on the working group with me. First of all, I have my co-lead for the working group, Sarah Cameron, who works with me at Pinsent Masons. And while I'm an expert on the built environment side of legal, we're a great team because Sarah covers everything data, data sharing, AI, Internet of Things. So thanks, Sarah. We have Peter van Manen. And Peter is a member of the Digital Twin Hub Strategic Advisory Board, but he's also a principal consultant at Frazer-Nash Consultancy, where he covers digital twins and autonomy in the defence, energy and transport sectors. We have Joseph Otoo. Joseph is a senior legal counsel at ARUP, and he is the UK EMEA digital legal lead for the ARUP business, and he advises the ARUP business on all things to do with intellectual property, data sharing and innovative business models. And we're also very lucky to have Angela Baker from the Open Data Institute, and she's been leading at the ODI on data assurance, and data assurance is obviously a super important topic for everything to do with digital twins, particularly when we're getting into big data, so more on that later. So we're the latest working group to be formed, and I don't know if any of you heard Wendy Hall earlier, but she talked about the kind of jigsaw puzzle that is connected digital twins, and the Strategic Advisory Board, I guess, had this idea that there was a piece missing from the jigsaw puzzle, which is the way that businesses and organizations set up, structure, and operate connected digital twin models, which we totally agree that was a missing piece. So we set up the group, and we've been working pretty flat out since January, and more on that later. But the format of today is very simple. It's going to be question and answer. If you do have questions, that's fine. I don't know, you said something about post-it notes. We'll see how we go. I'll try and leave some time for questions, and I've got my Slido open here, or maybe you'll bring it up. But I'll try and make sure that we've got some time for that. But Sarah, let's start with you. I know you're holding a nice bit of paper here, which is our booklet showing that we have in fact produced something so far. You'll be pleased to hear, not just a talking shop. But it's only the beginning, isn't it? So where have we got to so far, and what is there left to do?
There's plenty left to do. When we started back in January, February, we set ourselves the task in our terms of reference to produce practical, actionable outputs, because a whole load of text isn't much use to anybody. And what we've managed to achieve in the space of 4 meetings and a few side conversations is an executive summary of our collective aligned thinking. And so we've got some kind of output, but it is only the beginning. And so if I can try and summarize on governance and trust, what that collective thinking comes down to. Well, you can't parachute in trust and governance. You have to start with the fact that you have to have stakeholders very clear on the collective vision and purpose, their own organizational purpose, and then there has to be trust in the operational model for delivering the purpose and the value that is anticipated for each organization and collectively. Only when you've got full engagement from stakeholders and understanding of those can you engender and develop trust. And we did a lot of talking about goodwill trust, competence trust, trust in data, data assurance, and then trust in outcomes. And when you've gone through those stages on a slightly iterative basis, then you can start shaping governance. And governance and the extent of it will depend on context, complexity, scale, and sensitivity. But essentially, you need stakeholders designing and operating governance collectively, a clear set of rules, clear data assurance and information governance, and then you can progress towards legals to reflect that, which Joseph will cover later.
Thanks, Sarah. And I'm glad that you made those points, because I think for us, what we hit upon straight away is just how important it is to be able to show outcomes for participants, those outcomes which are what they're relying on in order to deliver value and to deal with that at the outset. So Sarah, we were really keen, weren't we, when we were setting this up to get a diverse group of individuals. How's that gone, and how do you think it's helping, having this kind of commercial and sort of intellectual diversity of thought?
Yeah, so we've got the most fantastic team. Nobody knew anybody on that team before, but we've got those experienced in strategy, CEO of Utterbury, a sensor company. We have got accountants, lawyers, data, digital, technical architecture specialists, and academics. And with that group of people, you have managed to align the thinking from all of those perspectives, once we've baselined, to come together about the right approach to this. And the sectors we've got is infrastructure, we have got defence, we've got utilities, we have got technology. But that diverse group, once we've aligned our thinking, we really think we could actually do great things together as a group, going on a journey a bit like getting to a connected digital twin.
Peter, can I pick on you? So you were a slightly late joiner, joining us from the Strategic Advisory Board, and we were delighted to have you, so thank you. How important to the board is this particular missing piece of the jigsaw around governance and trust and setting up and operating models and all that good stuff?
Thank you. I think the short answer is it's vital for what we're doing. And I think the work of the working group and the people in the working group is absolutely brilliant. The connected digital twins rely on sharing data and sharing outcomes from digital twins. And oftentimes some of the blockers that come about are commercial blockers and financial blockers, etc. And so the whole element of trust, as Anne-Marie has pointed out, is essential. People need to trust the data they have and trust the data they're getting. They need to be able to trust that if they share or if they trade data, it'll be looked after by others and used for the reason that it has been shared. And they also need to trust the outcomes that come from the digital twins, that they are representative of the truth. And so trust sort of goes throughout the whole process. And we often find there's a lot of discussion on a technical level about what needs to be done to make a connected digital twin work. And we sort of leave aside some of the commercial parts that need to be sorted out too late. And then when the engineers are all ready to start, they say, okay, can we get going? So yeah, but we haven't looked at the terms and conditions. We don't know the operating model, blah, 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 blah. So getting ahead of the game is absolutely vital. And so I think the group that we have in the working group, because it has technical people, legal people, finance people, it's been really great just to see the way it's interacted and come up with the first step of a sort of a recipe for how you put together a digital twin.
Peter, and I'm glad you mentioned the C word. That's commercial, by the way, because it is really, really important. And I guess the other side of it is that dual nature of governance, isn't it? It drives the trust, but it also regulates the risk, the compliance, and all of that good stuff. Now, how do you think the work of this working group will complement the other working groups? I know we have skills, we have, I think it's business case or business value working group. We have I think
standards and interoperability.
That's it, standards and interoperability. Thank you very much, Sarah. How do you think the work of this working group complements the work of the others?
I think it complements it very well. The nature of when you're looking at a strategy is when you get an outcome, you sort of reverse engineer it and say, yeah, that's exactly what we intended to do. But actually it's worked out very well, because the other groups, the interoperability is looking very much at the technical side of things. How can you use best practice to be able to connect digital twins together? The business case and communicating values tackles the very difficult problem of how do you get business people and technical people to talk together in the same language, and oftentimes the digital twin provides them that sort of common point of communication, which is very interesting. And I think the digital skills and identifying the skill gaps, tackles the very important part of people. You need the people to do the work, you need the people to exploit the work, and so it's a different type of skills to perhaps many that people who are not familiar with digital twins are used to. So I think all four of the working groups sort of tackles the big blockers from different angles, and I've been really impressed the way that's come together. But you all in the audience, if you come to all of the sessions on the working group, you can be the judge. But if you think well, I'll leave it to you. Thanks.
Bigging us up, Peter. We like it. We need a bit of encouragement. And I like that you've highlighted there that you've got silos, not just between organisations actually, but silos even within companies between these different kind of capability sets, legal, commercial, technical.
The silos within companies are often the hardest ones to crack.
Absolutely, absolutely. Would you believe even in law firms? Amazing. So, Joseph, on to you. The legal side of data sharing is just so important for connected digital twins to become reality. And you have been doing lots of really good work with others in the working group on this topic, which we are very thankful for. So could I ask you, what do you think are the challenges to adoption and practice, and how do you think you can address some of these data sharing challenges collaboratively across organisations?
Yeah, thank you. It's been really fascinating to be part of the working group, but we do have challenges, and the industry does have significant challenges when it comes to data sharing. I think there's two key points that I've identified. The first one is diversity, and that problem really is around the approach, the language used, the principles adopted. There is so much diversity within the industry. There's no common baseline or framework. So as an example, when we all got together and we first started to talk about this working group, we were all industry experts, but we came together and everybody was talking at cross purposes. Everybody was using a slightly different term, concept, idea to explain very similar things. And so when you have a working group and you can't have a baseline, how do you expect the industry to have a baseline? So I think that's the first point. And one of the key things we're trying to do is try and kind of find a baseline, common set of terms, common definitions, so everybody's actually starts at the same place. I think the second point is a diversity in terms of agreements. Every organisation has either a standard form or a bespoke agreement, and that really poses a challenge. Whose terms are you going to use? What are these terms? Do they reflect our contracting principles? Are governance going to sign it off? There is a real challenge there. And then you start to talk about the diversity of the names of agreements, data sharing agreements, data licensing, data access agreements, data processing agreements. It becomes really difficult. I think the final point really is around what I call back-end governance. So you go through this whole process where you know the project teams, the commercial teams, try and get to a point where they're agreeing a data sharing agreement, and then once you have an agreement, you send it internally, and the governance happens right at the end. And everybody's very risk averse. Nobody quite knows what's happened. The people who sign off on agreements are not necessarily people who have had any involvement in the front end, and that does create some blockages.
Thanks, Joseph. And I couldn't agree more with all of that, particularly that bit about different contracting forms. As a lawyer, that's something that I see all the time. Different procurement teams, different experts who like to use the contracts that they're used to. So what would be the key takeaways for the audience, for people who are looking to develop legal agreements? Any kind of top tips you could share?
I would say the agreement comes at the end. So there needs to be a lot of front-end work done on understanding the principles, understanding the approach, and getting stakeholders on board early on. When we talk about contracts, we talk about offensive or defensive provisions, and that's really around provisions which protect you and which limit liability and risk mitigation, and provisions which allow you to do what you need to do in the agreement. And I think that balance has become skewed. So I'd say it needs to be rebalanced, and we need to talk about the opportunity within data sharing agreements rather than just the risk. I think that's the first point. Second point is we really need to have a common framework and a process by which we can find a way to get into agreement easily. And that's something that we're thinking about at the moment. Final point, standard form. I think the industry needs a standard form data sharing agreement, just like we have in the construction industry or in the energy industry, something which kind of reflects an industry norm, and that should be a really good starting point. I don't know how many years that is off, but I think that's an aspiration that I think would really unlock this.
Modular form of data sharing agreement, as an NEC contracts expert, that appeals to me immensely. So thanks for saying that. And I also love this idea of a data sharing heads of terms before you get in and try and document it all. And also this idea of the opportunity, which of course comes back to the value and the benefits that your participants are looking to get from your connected digital twin. So Angela, you're not going to escape this. We were it was so vital to us to have somebody from the ODI involved in the working group, because we wanted to align with all the amazing work that the ODI has done. There's no point in us reinventing the wheel when you guys have done it better for us already. And I know that you have been, personally really leading on data assurance. I'll come back and I'll ask you a question on that shortly. But first of all, let's kind of go back to basics, because one of the things that we think is really important is that amazing work that the ODI did on the data spectrum. Can you help the audience understand why the data spectrum is just so key for digital twins?
I think, thank you, Anne-Marie. I wanted to say a little bit about the ODI, because obviously our name is Open Data Institute, and we are 10 years old, and we're all about an open, trustworthy data ecosystem. But we recognise at the ODI that not all data is open, and we start a lot of our conversations with the data spectrum. And our view is it doesn't have to be complicated. It can be quite simple. And as has been mentioned by my working group colleagues, the digital twin benefits all come from sharing data, accessible data, using data. And if you start with the data spectrum, it helps you look at the data that you've got and that you need. And it starts from closed on one end. So that might be very personal data that's closed even within an organization. It's only available to certain people, but it's still available for those people. Then you can move to shared data that can be shared internally within an organization or externally under specific licensing conditions that restrict use and accessibility, all the way to open. And open doesn't just mean open under an open data license. It can be open data like a bus timetable where there's no licensing. And it's recognizing the data that you're trying to access and use that you want to make available and accessible, and understanding where it sits on the spectrum. And what's very useful about the data spectrum and the piece of work at the beginning, thinking about the data, is that you might have some data that you can make available. And often organizations will look at the data and say, no, we can't make any data available. But once you start to split it up and you consider all your data and you look at the licensing terms and you make it available and accessible, then that's how you can really benefit the work of the digital twin and give it to the people who really need it.
Thanks, Angela. And I'm going to get on to a specialist topic for you, which is data assurance. And I know you were very involved in the data assurance white paper that was produced by the ODA, I think a couple of years ago now. I think it's data assurance, what is it and how can we use it, or something along those lines. Sorry if I've got the name wrong. Obviously everybody's talking about AI at the moment, and we are in the world of big data with connected digital twins. Where there is big data, there is undoubtedly going to be AI. Tell us about why data assurance is so important now more than ever.
Well, how long have we got? I could talk about data assurance all day. Yeah, we've got a white paper. It came out quite recently. It's on our website. There's lots of stuff available on the website for free, so have a look. And how we define it at the ODI is a set of processes that enable organizations to prove trustworthiness in their data and the data practices. So it's not just the data itself, it's actually the practices and the data practices of that organization. And we believe that if you can demonstrate the trustworthiness of it, then the data will be used and you will enable greater value from that data. So we all know that data has a value, But if it's not used and it's not accessible, or people don't trust it, then it has no value. In the case of digital twins, it's very important because I think it's been mentioned already now, but it was mentioned in the plenaries. If you don't trust the outputs and the analysis that's been done within the twin, then it doesn't mean anything. So you have to think about the trustworthiness of your data. And we're not just talking about data quality. We've had a few conversations internally at the ODI with some of our stakeholders. It's not just about quality of data. It's thinking about things like the governance, the security, the ethics. That's a big thing at the ODI, thinking about the ethical nature of that data and your data practices, the skills of the people using the data, how it's stored. There are quite a lot of elements to it. And if you start with the data, a little bit like Joseph was saying, if you start with the initial things and then get to the agreements at the end, it's the same with data. You need to get the data right, and then you can be confident in the outputs.
Thank you so much, Angela, and that was a brilliant explanation. I certainly found it useful. So there is going to be time for questions. If anybody's got some questions, by all means, think about them and put your hand up. And there's a question online, is it?
Yes, if you look on the iPad.
I've got it on the, oh, here we go, on my phone, there you go. Very interested in the data spectrum and how it maps to built environment asset data. This is right your space with your geotechnical background, Angela. Particularly with respect to infrastructure security. Has the ODI done any generic mapping exercises in this space?
We've done a huge amount of work with the spectrum. So I think every time we meet a client and do any work with any stakeholder, we start with the data spectrum. So this is always the start of the discussion, and I would encourage you to go to the website and download the PDF. It's very useful, even if you just want to do a little team building exercise with your team to talk about your data and using the data spectrum. I will have a little look at the website and I will see if I can point you to something about infrastructure. I'm sure there is something that we've done in the past, so I will take that offline and
homework for you, Angela. Okay, we have a question at the front here. Do you have a microphone for the question? Maybe we can share ours. There you go. Collaborative. I like it.
Hi, everybody. Hopefully you can hear. So I'm Peter from Fathom. We provide global hazard and flood risk data to do with climate change. I'll come on to your point, Joseph, about legal and data sharing. It's a really, really simple example. Okay, so we might have a client such as ARUP come into our offices and say, hey, we really love this data. It looks really interesting. We could plug it into lots of climate and environment related digital twins. Can we have a sample to take a look at it? A pretty common situation to happen. We then might say, yep, no problem, but we need you to sign an NDA before we can start sharing our data with you. And immediately the inertia's gone, and it can be months before that team who are quite technical are able to contact their legal team to get a very basic NDA signed off. And it feels like systematically there are some issues in the legal operating model in our organisations that stifle that sort of collaboration. So my question is, where do we start unpicking that, and is there a clear way to go? Is my
question, and really demonstrates the problem of silos and people not knowing each other and being connected. Who is going to take this question from the panel? Joseph, do you want to have a go?
Yeah, I can try, and I completely agree. That's a significant issue, and what happens is that it moves from one silo to the other. I think the answer to this is to really upskill the project teams to be able to make a call on this. They're going to need the knowledge, and they're going to need the agreements at their fingertips, but also going to need to know what to look for in the agreements. The NDAs are really on the simple side of the complexity of legal agreements. So there isn't any reason why we can't upskill the business, the commercial and project personnel to really negotiate and enter into these agreements. Once it gets really complicated, then the project team still should be empowered, but that should be done within a risk management framework, I think. And that risk management framework needs to be present from the beginning rather than at the back end. And anybody else would like to?
Okay, sorry, you go, Peter.
Just a quick comment. NDAs are always more complicated than they need to be, because the essence of an NDA, of every NDA, is exactly the same. And then people put stuff in, and I think we just need simpler NDAs.
there is a one NDA project which has been championed by the legal industry, but it does have a cost to it, which is one generic form of NDA. So we have a lot of questions coming in. We may not have time for all of them. I'm going to start at the bottom because that's an easy one. Do you have any more information on the document Anne-Marie and Sarah mentioned? Almost. This will be uploaded on the Digital Twin Hub site, we hope, next week. So bear with us on that and keep your eyes peeled. Oh, that's a bit complicated. Joseph, in order to support interoperability, have you considered leveraging federated ontologies? Oh, okay, this is to deal with that point about different terminology and understanding.
The answer is, I think, yes. We are considering the terminology concepts used in different contexts and making sure we're not trying to reinvent the wheel. I think the problem is it all depends on where you're looking for these ontologies, and that's the real challenge. Sarah, maybe you've got something to add on that.
This is where the links with the other working groups come together. So one of the other working groups is interoperability and standards. We had breakfast with them this morning, and we're going to work more closely together. But yeah, this is a key area because at the moment you've got these siloed ontologies. But what it's coming down to is interoperability. Creating a monolithic ontology of everything is just going to block progress in this space. So let's work on APIs, interoperability, and then progress from there.
Great example. The word governance means completely different things to technical people and legal people, which is a very funny example. So we have a number of other questions. Somebody's saying, could we produce a data spectrum for the built environment? That's an interesting challenge for the ODI, Angela. Maybe another one to take back. Now here's another question. Has acknowledgement or use credit when data and services been shared been part of the discussions yet? Sarah? That's an interesting point to raise. So how we acknowledge and credit the use of data. I mean, this is really an intellectual property and ownership point, is it? I think the answer is no, we haven't dealt with it yet. So we've got one question from...
I see.
Your question. Okay, thanks for that.
You need more context.
Yeah, we've got 2 minutes, so let's finish on this one.
So the context is in the academic domain. If something's shared or generated by a researcher, and it goes to other projects or to other organizations, that credit is, or that use of the data becomes partly impact that project or that researcher's output. So acknowledgement is becoming a key thing as part of these agreements. So if you want to build trust in the academic domain, you need to have acknowledgement of everything that gets shared or reused.
So this is a really good example of where we're trying to go. At the moment, we've just had a short period of exchanging views and aligning our thinking. Where we want to go next is to actually take a live, real case scenario, work through our approach and our thinking, and then we can address all of these issues, because it's important to maintain that stakeholder engagement in trust, that there is fair value, fair recognition, and outputs that reflect that and provide the value that they've gone into the project in the first place on. That's all part of the picture.
That's a great question. Thank you so much. So we're just finishing up. There's a couple of other questions. By all means, John, if you could get the questions sent to us, we'll try and respond to them separately.
If you wanted, you could probably
take a couple of
answer
minutes.
these two and then we'll wrap.
Yeah, has there been discussion with technology vendors to get them to better enable the supply chain to make data accessible? We have technology vendors in our working group, which I guess is the first point to make. We are collaborating more widely with other active technology vendors in this space. So I think that process has started. I love this last one. Connected digital twins can be exposing. They can highlight issues and failures. The insight's important for improvement and progress. Couldn't agree more. Do you have any guidance on how to make stakeholders comfortable with transparency and foster a culture of collaboration and cooperation? Yes, we will be working on this. Is an absolutely key building block. So thanks to whoever raised that question. Collaboration is an expert area of mine. It is not something that could be covered in a couple of minutes of answering, but I would be very glad for somebody to contact me separately, and I will talk to you about collaboration. It takes skill, it takes resource, it takes investment, it takes education. It's not something that you can just do like that without kind of really understanding how to enable success and where it can go wrong. So that is absolutely going to feed into our future work, isn't it, Sarah?
Well, yes, but it's about ongoing, continued stakeholder engagement and the 4 different types of trust that we talked about just earlier, briefly.
Better stop there. Thank you so much for all the questions. Come and find us if you see us wandering around and ask us more questions, or get in touch via John. That's fine.